Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this month's webinar, Lights, Stage, Learn, the Transformative Power of Theater and Education. My name is Joshua Chard. I am the Arts Integration Teacher Leadership Fellow for the Maine Department of Education, Office of Teaching and Learning. I'm also the 2024 Maine Teacher of the Year. And I'm particularly excited about this conversation that we're going to have today because in addition to all of those things, I'm also a freelance professional theater maker. And I'm joined today by two other professional theater makers from my community who I will allow to introduce themselves in just a moment. And full disclosure, these are theater professionals with whom I've worked and had the pleasure of making theater with. And when I decided that I wanted to do a presentation on what teachers can do, how we can integrate theater into our classrooms, and also how we can get students out to see theater and experience theater, there was no one else I could think of more that I would want to speak to about this subject than my two guests today. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce my guests, Reba Askari and Emily Dixon. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce you, do a brief introduction. How about we start with you, Reba?
Of course. My name is Reba Askari. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the theater artistic director here at the Children's Museum and Theater of Maine.
And
Um,
Emily?
I am Emily Dixon. My pronouns are she, they, and I am the theater production manager at the Children's Museum and Theater of Maine.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this afternoon. I know that there are going to be lots of teachers that check this out and will have questions. If you are watching this asynchronously, at the end, my contact information will be on the final slide, and please feel free to reach out to me with questions. I'm always happy to talk with people. Before we dive into the meat of our discussion today, I was hoping that you could tell a little bit about the history of the Children's Theater of Maine, with a particular focus on where the organization is now, and remembering that we have an audience of teachers from across the state of Maine. And while on its surface, the Children's Theater Museum and Theater of Maine seems like it's a Southern Maine institution, maybe talk a little bit about how there has been a statewide impact as you have built and as you have started this new chapter in the history of the Children's Theater of Maine.
Yes. Oh, I'd be delighted to talk about that. Um, the Children's Theater of Maine was founded in 1924 by the Junior League of Portland. At that point, it was the Portland Children's Theater, and it was volunteer adults performing for children um, and and often performing in outdoor locations. Um, since that time in 1924, it's been lots of different things. In the 40s and 50s, it was a trailer theater that was traveling all over Maine, even to New York City. A group of high schoolers were putting on plays for younger people. There was a period of time where it was closely associated with the University of Southern Maine and the theater department there. And it was college students performing for children. There's been periods of time where it's just professional adult actors putting on theater for children. In 2008, we merged with the Children's Museum of Maine to become one organization, the Children's Museum and Theater of Maine. We spent a lot of time from 2008 to 2020 doing theater for kids by kids. So it was all young actors performing for an even younger audience. But we were also dreaming of our future and thinking about what we could be. And that was around the time also in 2020 when we broke ground and built our dream theater here in Portland. It's part of the Children's Museum on Thompson's Point, and we've created an 89 seat thrust stage built with a young audience in mind. And we do what we're trying to do is a little bit of everything from the children's theater history. So we have adult actors performing for a young audience. That's what we call our Theater for Young Audiences program. We also have intergenerational plays where we have young actors and adult actors working together as co-collaborators to create theater. We also have our touring component. So that was thinking about all of Maine and how we can reach all of Maine. We, in the past 4 years, we've toured shows to 10 out of 14 Maine counties. So our goal is to reach all counties. So if there's any teachers from Lincoln County listening, we haven't been to Lincoln County yet, but we do tour throughout the state. And we also have a crew program. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about our crew program blossoming
Yeah.
here?
It's an opportunity for kids who want to be involved in theater but are uncomfortable being on stage. They can come and run the lights for the show. So they'll work with a professional stage manager and a professional lighting designer to actually make the lights change during the performances. From there, they can grow through the program to become deck captains and work backstage, helping with scene changes and prop handoffs and getting the stage ready before the show, working very closely with the actors backstage. And from there, they can become assistant stage managers and join during the rehearsal period to see how things come together. We've got, I think, 25 kids in the program right now, and ranging from ages 10 to 16. And they are unbelievably helpful in everything that we do. But it's a great way for kids who don't want to be on stage to still be involved with making theater.
That's great. Thank you so much for that background. Um, I have been really proud to be a small part of the last few years of growth at the Children's Theater of Maine. And I can say, as an educator, my students' experience coming to see a show at the Children's Theater of Maine became all they wanted to talk about for the next month. All they wanted to engage in an imaginative play was putting on their own production of Knuffle Bunny, casting the production. The best line was when one of my strong students who was directing informed one of the students that she thought that they would make a good washing machine in the cast. So that I've seen firsthand the power of high quality theater for young people as an educator and how it can infuse beyond that one experience of seeing the show, how it can become something that becomes interwoven throughout your classroom practice and part of our students' autobiographies. It becomes life-changing to see things like this. So we're going to dive right in. And our first question is for Reba. First, I got to go through our learning targets. As a teacher, always got to do the learning targets. So our learning targets for today are participants will gain insights from educator and theater professionals on the academic, social, and emotional benefits of incorporating theater into student learning. Attendees will explore diverse perspectives on how live theater experiences can enhance student engagement, cultural awareness, and critical thinking. Educators will learn strategies for using theatrical techniques such as role-playing, improvisation, and storytelling to enrich classroom instruction across subjects. And participants will discuss ways to foster student confidence, creativity, and collaboration through theater-based activities and performances. And so let's dive right in with our first question. And we're going to do this pretty informally. I may chime in because I have some experience in this realm too, but we're going to start with a question for you, Reba. And the question is, how can theater be used to engage students who may not typically excel in traditional academic settings?
Yes. Well, I'm going to start by saying that theater taps into something really deeply human, which is our innate love of stories. At its core, theater follows narrative structures. So thinking about like the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which is a framework that just resonates across cultures and learning styles. This structure with its call to adventure and trials and transformations and return It provides a built-in and almost primal pathway for engagement. So as students see themselves reflected in characters and challenges, that can just spark something that, and it's a tool. It's a tool that teachers can use. Um, Theater offers this alternative mode of learning that's immersive and embodied and social. It's collaboration at its core. Storytelling activates the brain differently than passive learning. It engages in problem solving, those problem solving muscles. It engages our emotional and our sensory centers, and it makes content more memorable and meaningful. When students participate in theater, um, they're living it. They're experiencing it through action, through dialogue, through collaboration. And it's a multi-sensory level of engagement that makes complex ideas more accessible, especially for students that might struggle in a traditional academic format. Theater meets children where they naturally play. So even before, way before they step into a classroom, kids are engaging in imaginative storytelling already. So whether it's through make-believe or role-playing or watching movies, by embracing this instinctual form of learning, theater can transform education into a really deep experience. And it fosters creativity and confidence and critical thinking, offering every student, regardless of where they sit in their academic world, it can offer them a place to thrive.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I was one of those students. I did not typically excel in a traditional academic setting. I struggled in school for a lot of reasons. I was a student that may have been labeled as that kid. You don't want that kid in your class. Uh, and it was finding my way to theater as a teenager that hooked me into learning and made me realize that school was someplace I wanted to be. And in fact, it was someplace I wanted to spend the rest of my life. I'm now in year 33 of my career as an educator, and everything that has led up to all the good things in my life, all the good things in my career, all start from that first high school musical that I did. It all starts from there. That it was the beginning of everything that is good in my life as a professional, as a husband, as a grandfather. All of those things start from this place of finding and having finding myself and having the opportunity to participate in educational theater. So our next question, Reba and Emily, you're both going to tackle this one. So I'm the arts integration teacher leader, and I'm really working on this year on this idea that there are theater teachers, but you don't have to be a theater teacher to teach theater and to integrate theater into your classroom. You don't have to be a content specialist in the arts to teach with theater, to teach with music. So can you talk a little bit about some examples of how theater can be easily integrated into subjects like science, math, history, or any of the other subjects our students are studying?
Yeah. I actually got my start in theater as a carpenter, and was not good at math as a carpenter, which I quickly learned was a skill I really needed. Being able to figure out the angle of a support brace so that a platform could be safe, figuring out how much wood to order in order to build a set, that wasn't going to break the budget, figuring out how to draw something to scale so that I could represent spatial awareness on a piece of paper before making it three-dimensional, all brought this subject that I had struggled with my entire life into practical application. And suddenly math became one of my fortes because I could look at a piece of wood and know exactly how to make it into something else by using math. I used the Pythagorean theorem probably 3 or 4 times production in just trying to figure out a diagonal brace that will keep something safe but take up the least amount of room. Which is, when I was in school, I never thought I would even remember those words. And now it's something I use all the time. I am also a lighting designer now, and lights, the trajectory that lights are moving in theater, they're LED and color changing, and it really requires an understanding of color theory within the science of color that needs to be embraced. You can't have an ensemble member who needs to be in the background wearing a bright shirt that's going to glow under a certain color light. And so understanding how light impacts color and how colors impact each other is huge. And it's also become apparent as more diversity is being explored in theater, that skin tones reflect light differently. And some actors may look great under one color while their co-star looks washed out and sick. And so needing to find the right balance to make everyone on stage look their best is a huge part of color theory as well. I always say that fluorescent light makes no one look good, and understanding how you can create that look on stage means that you can create people looking good on stage as well. And then with history, I think storytelling is the most common way for generations to pass knowledge on to younger generations. And in theater, we're able to do that by creating an entire world on stage and welcoming the audience into a fully realized world, and having those opportunities to follow a character and follow a story through its completion can resonate more with audiences than just perhaps listening to it. And really being in the room and feeling that emotion can make something much more recognizable and reachable to younger audiences.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that a little bit, because I truly believe in arts integration in a deep way of I think arts integration is the way kids learn. And I think theater can be integrated into every subject. So when I was in graduate school, I spent a lot of time studying what's known as process drama, which is a pedagogy that was developed in England, and it's used in Europe a lot and in Australia. And I think a lot of US teachers do it without calling it process drama. But it's unlike traditional scripted theater, and it really focuses on improv and student-driven storytelling, allowing learners to step into roles and explore complex ideas and embody different perspectives. So thinking about like a history class, students engaging in a reenactment of a historical moment. So rather than memorizing facts about that historical moment, they're actively taking on roles and then debating and making decisions in real time. And this method deepens their understanding by immersing students in the past, and they're stepping into the shoes of these characters, right? I think you can apply this to a science classroom where potentially an example, students might take on roles as NASA scientists preparing for a mission to Mars. So they're working through these real world problems, and they're thinking in their head, okay, if I were a scientist, what would I do? What would I do? And process drama, it's all about the process of making drama, right? There's no final performance. It's not a play. So they're not following scripts. They're really just thinking, if I were this scientist, how might I go about this mission? Um, in a math class, students might act as architects, designing a sustainable city and calculating area and volume and resource allocation and giving students this meaningful role and responsibility. Math becomes an essential tool for solving these real problems, right? So, um, again, process drama, it's all about this dramatic process, and there's no final result in the end. But I mean, I think about like a mock trial, right? Is really using these techniques and and creating this like very visceral and memorable experience for children, um that's different than reading about a trial in a book.
Yeah, I think that when I hear what I think about when you talk about that, is there that opportunity to build empathy and understanding and to deepen your background knowledge about people who are different than you in the world. In an elementary school classroom, in an SEL curriculum, it's a great there you have the opportunity to role play and to work through scenarios that students identify as things that might be challenging for them on the playground, in the cafeteria, or how do you ask for help? If how do you advocate for help? Let's role play that. And I really like your focus on the process rather than the product. I think that sometimes when we're talking about the arts, we get bogged down in who's our audience and how are we going to present it to that audience. Even when we're putting on a play, even when we're rehearsing a play with the ultimate goal being to present it to an audience, 98% of our time is spent on the process of building the world in which that play exists. Only a small percentage of the time is spent performing it for an audience. It's all the work that goes in ahead of time that is
Absolutely.
where the learning and the growing, and the understanding grows. And so I want to keep coming back to that word process.
And absolutely, Joshua, I think that you'll find that there are some kids that get really excited about the idea of putting on a play, right? But then there's other kids that say, no, there's no way I want to do this in front of anyone, but I'm ready to participate in this active imagination role-playing scenario. But please don't invite anyone to watch me, right?
Exactly.
And so when you ask the question about the first question you asked about how to reach all learners, I think it's by putting process first.
I agree. And Emily, I want to thank you for making sure that our focus doesn't only stay on performing the people who are playing the roles, because there are a lot of roles when it comes to developing a theater piece that don't involve having to be out in the spotlight, but that are amazingly creative, that build all of those soft skills that we want our students to leave school with, that ability to collaborate, that ability to imagine, that ability to make a goal, set a goal and bring it to fruition, to picture something in your head and make it come to life. I think that's one of the things we're talking about here is those soft skills that we need to just exist.
Yeah. Teamwork can be so focused on being competitive so often of the time that we kind of forget to teach how to be a team in just achieving a goal together. And I want to, there's another question where I'll get more into that, but it really, theater teaches that collaboration and communication in a way that you may not get with other projects. And at its core, theater is a project, and a lot of my job is project management and just making sure that the team members are talking to each other and being able to communicate their ideas so that the final product on stage is a cohesive world that the audience can really feel is real and exists.
So we've already touched on this a little bit, but for me, this question is one of the most important questions to ask. And That is the skill, the development of empathy and an understanding of diverse perspectives. We live in a world where social media and other situations have allowed us, and all of us are guilty of it, of siloing ourselves and surrounding ourselves in an echo chamber that only it involves our own perspectives and our own opinions and our own experiences in the world. So, how does exposure to live theater help students develop empathy and an understanding of diverse perspectives?
Yeah, learning about people different from ourselves is the best way to understand empathy. The stories that we tell on stage represent characters from all sorts of backgrounds, from communities who face struggles different than our own. And audiences are along for the journey of overcoming those obstacles in a variety of ways. In uh, Seeing the different approaches to how someone may live their life or how they may face adversity can provide a different perspective that you may have never thought of before. Um, right now, we're doing the play Pete the Cat, and it's about a cat who loves to rock out and a young boy who is afraid to color outside the lines. And he lives his life by the rules. And Pete is there to help him learn how to express himself in a way that he never thought he could. And it's really having this incredible impact on kids who can see themselves either as Pete, who maybe need to learn control a little bit, or as Jimmy, his second grade friend, who is afraid to let loose, but in the end can really celebrate the different things that they bring to each other. um, Learning about others can only deepen a sense of empathy and understanding, which will lead to a stronger and inclusive community. And theater can do that with being very intentional with the stories that we're telling on stage.
Yeah. And to add to this, this is something we talk about in children's theater, like in this realm all the time. We talk about windows and mirrors. So thinking about the stories that we tell as either windows to imagine a what if, a different possibility, a different world, or mirrors that are going to reflect something in your world back to you.
All right, great. So, our next question is for Reba. And so, you can't have a conversation about anything in schools without talking about the financial barriers to participation. And that is always a struggle. We know that our public schools are under-resourced. They do amazing things with the resources they have. I'm proud to be a part of all of that. But the truth is we are under-resourced. So what advice do you have for educators in schools with limited budget or limited access to local theater programs?
Yeah, I love this question because the entire time before we built this fancy new theater, I was directing 6 plays a year in a basement with very low ceilings and very limited resources. So I can definitely relate to teachers that are trying to start something and frustrated with not having access to budgets or local theater programs. I I want to go back to what we were talking about before in terms of process, and I think embracing a process-based approach is really key. So I also there's a very famous director named Peter Brook who penned a term called rough theater, the kind of theater that really thrives on simplicity and ingenuity and human connection rather than like expensive sets or costumes. So um, I love theater that's really scrappy. And my advice is focus on process and start really small and see if there's a love for it. See if it sparks something in your students. Um, I I think theater doesn't require a stage. It really only requires imagination. And there's no need for a scripted play. So I don't think you need to really worry about paying for royalties. Like there's a lot of open source or public domain resources out there. Um, there's also ways to just make plays and create plays with your students. So um, I think a really good example of that is thinking about living newspaper projects, and that's where students become living newspapers and report on some kind of historical time, bringing it to life as different characters. I I also think that you can use a classroom as a stage. I mean, I think teachers use classrooms as theaters all the time as presenting information. So
I say that during the day I play the role of Mr. Chard's second grade teacher. That
I
he is
bet
a
you
character
do.
that I play for 7 hours a day. So
Yeah. I mean, classrooms, hallways, outdoor spaces can become site-specific spaces for storytelling. Desks can become landscapes. People can mime props. Really, I think it's all about prioritizing creativity over resources. And I I think I think thinking about arts integration and integrating theater into everyday learning and um and then really kind of trusting the process. I feel like if there's a love for it and you can demonstrate that love for it with your students and everybody's on board, like let's do a performance. I think over time those those programs can become funded with a demonstrated love. Um,
I
but
would
I think focusing on process and engagement over performance or perfection.
I would agree with that. One of the things that I was really successful with in to enable my students to get to see theater was reaching out to local community theaters and saying, listen, I teach in a high needs, high poverty school. I don't have any kind of budget to buy theater tickets. Would it be possible? We're studying this in school and we happen to notice that you're doing this show that's related to that. Would it be possible for me to bring a busload of kids to a dress rehearsal? Would some of your volunteer actors like to come in and work in my classroom with my students? Would you like to come do an after school workshop in my classroom? I think what I find is that 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. That organizations get excited about doing those things. And it's not, it can feel like the business of theater is all about collecting that money in the box office. And that is a piece of it because that is necessary for theaters to survive. But the truth is with that almost every community in this state is pretty close to a community-based, volunteer-based organization that presents theater, often presenting family-friendly theater because there's a market for that. And so for years, my students' first experiences were going to see a dress rehearsal of a community theater musical, which may have had to stop in the middle and they had to reset and fix things, which in of itself is a learning experience
Oh,
about the.
absolutely. Yes.
So
Yes.
people should not allow that to be a barrier. And if you're looking to bring an organization in to do theater in your community, you have lots of small businesses in your community, and there are also grant sources that are looking to fund that kind of thing, this kind of creativity. You teach in a high poverty rural school system, there are people that are going to want to donate money so that you can bring Maddie's Theater into your community to present Charlotte's Web or something like that.
Absolutely. Well, right now we're touring Red Riding Hood, so a plug for that. And yes, I would encourage schools not to feel sticker shock. I think we have a bookings page on our website with information about our touring shows, and we have schools reach out to us all the time. We are often working on grants and working with local businesses, especially with our touring shows. When we tour to a county in Maine, kind of looking at businesses in that county that may be up for subsidizing a touring show. So I think it's about making that contact, reaching out, and I know I feel like we're also trying to really connect with local art centers and opera houses so that when we tour, we're not just going to schools, but maybe we can go to an art center or an opera house, and multiple schools can come and see that touring show at the same time. So it becomes conversational and collaborative, and okay, how are we going to do this, right? And that first step is reaching out and getting on our radar.
And absolutely, and I think that arts organizations want to engage and to do that work with you. They're not just coming with their hand out. They want to engage and do that work with you because it's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, let's see. This is a question for Emily. Can you share a couple of specific activities or lesson ideas that use theater techniques to enhance student learning?
Yeah. One of my go-to theater lessons actually revolves around the story of the three pigs. It's a story that most kids grow up hearing, but they always hear it the same way. It takes place in maybe a meadow or a forest, and the houses are made of hay and sticks and bricks. And if you kind of flip that on its head a little bit and think outside of the box and you change the location of the story, how does that impact the story as a whole? So if you were to set the three pigs underwater, hay, sticks, and bricks don't exist there, but you may find seaweed and coral and a sea cave. And how does that impact the costumes that the actors might wear? How might that impact the sound that you hear happening around it? And so it's a really beautiful way to think about world building and how the smallest change in just a location or even a time period can impact an entire story. I used to teach this I taught high school for a long time, and I would use this as an introduction class with the freshman theater, and they would have to create entire productions. And the rule was there was no budget, there were no limits. Some very interesting things happened. Some kids set it in the wild, wild west, and the hay became like a dust ball blowing through the wind. One kid set it in outer space, and it became the story of three Martians and the astronaut. And the way that they really created this whole world that followed the same arc but changed in the way that it was presented was really beautiful. So there's no limitations to that, and you can do it with any story. The Three Pigs is nice because it does have those set three moments that keep it kind of straightforward and give you those blocks to build upon. But you can pick any story that your students know and change something about it and see how that impacts the entire story. And that's something that we do in theater all the time. When you read a script, it doesn't necessarily tell you when and where it takes place, and the director gets to decide those things, and the entire team comes together to create that world and tell that story through that vision. um, but it really gets you to think outside of the box. It's one of my favorite things. Kids come up with the wildest ideas, and they're always fascinating. Another really great thing is improv games. And this can feel overwhelming if you've never played improv games, but there are some really great resources out there to help kind of lead those and some introductory ones. But improv games can reinforce life skills without students even realizing it. They're just having fun playing games. They're not realizing that they're learning how to listen to one another. They're not realizing that they're learning how to make eye contact with their peers and how to trust one another, that their ideas will be taken seriously. The concept of yes and is huge in improv, and that is accepting what someone has given you as an idea and building upon it. And that's how brainstorming happens with adults and kids working together, and learning that skill through playing games helps them develop those skill sets in a really safe and trusted environment. And I have a thing here that says specific game ideas, and then I had so many different game ideas that I didn't write any down. I think one of my favorites, the one that I'll talk about first, and Reba, I know this is your bread and butter, so I don't know if you want to hop in with any, but my one that I love to play with especially elementary school aged kids is called Hunting the What's It. And one person stands on stage or in the center of the room and describes an imaginary creature. And it could be a cow that barks and hops on one foot. But the more that they describe this creature, another actor, another student has to act it out. And so they're listening to the words that the presenter are saying and be embodying the things that are happening. And then there's a fun thing where they get to chase each other because the what's it chases the person. That's a whole different point. But the core of it is listening and reacting and saying yes to what's happening. And it's beautiful when a kid that you don't think is necessarily paying attention suddenly can embody almost word for word what their peers are talking about, and they become this very silly creature on stage that has been described by somebody else, and they are invested in creating this moment together.
I want to jump onto that word silly, because as an elementary school teacher, I'm even starting to see among my 7 and 8-year-olds that they're reluctant to be silly in front of each other, that they're reluctant to engage in absurd play. And I try to incorporate silliness and joyfulness into all of the subject areas that I'm teaching. And so anytime that we can provide opportunities for children to practice being silly, it seems like, why would you have to practice being silly? But the truth is that for a lot of our students, they do need to practice being silly because they have been in situations that have squashed the silly out of them. And so I love that. I love that idea of activities that give students the opportunity to build those muscles, those I can play, I can improvise, I can be silly. I want to be mindful of time, so I'm going to hop on to our next question. Reba, how does participating in or observing theater help build confidence and communication skills in students?
Yes. Yes. I'll answer this question, but I think you hit on something so beautiful about silliness. And I wanna say that I have a 2-year-old at home, and she describes herself as silly, and it's her favorite word. And it is something that is innately who children are, and then they lose it. And I think then as adults, we're constantly just trying to get it back. So, but to building confidence, and I think that they're related here, silliness and confidence. For students who are naturally shy or hesitant to speak in class, theater is absolutely transformative. And I know that from experience. I can be in a meeting or a classroom, and if I can get away with not speaking a single word out loud, I will. A family situation, I have a shyness that I've spent my entire life trying to work against. And I know that there were classes in elementary school where I never spoke, or classes in high school or college or graduate school where I would just not speak a single word. And no one called on me, and I didn't raise my hand. And theater is different. Theater gets every voice in the room talking. And at its core, theater is really about speaking words out loud, whether it's a scripted line or something that's improv or a game. Unlike traditional classroom discussions where maybe a few confident students might really dominate the conversation. Theater ensures that everyone has a voice, and it removes the pressure of having the right answer. It replaces it with some safety in storytelling or stepping into role. So students that struggle with reading comprehension are going to benefit from acting things out, and saying words out loud. And when they embody a character, they're naturally going to slow down and process what they're saying and use tone and inflection to start bringing those words to life. Um, teacher Theater, I feel like really good directors are always saying theater's all about listening, right? And I think that theater teaches active listening because you have to react in real time. It's about listening and reaction. So whether it's a scripted play or again a game or improv, it's about processing language as something that's interactive and living rather than just words on a page. Um, so Also there's vocabulary components, right? And I think um, students who, like me, can go that entire class without speaking. Theater provides this very structured and anticipated way to break silence. And it's not necessarily public speaking in a traditional sense, but about stepping into role. And when you're playing someone else, it suddenly feels way safer to speak. And the voice that once stayed quiet suddenly has a reason to be heard. And then once they speak in a theatrical setting, it suddenly is easier to speak other places too, like in a classroom or in a meeting or in real life. It doesn't just give students words to say. It gives confidence and infuses confidence to say them.
And interestingly, I would have been the opposite of you as a student. I was a student who could not stay quiet for 5 minutes in a classroom. And that was seen as something that was bad and it was a deficit. But all of a sudden, I was being celebrated for being able to be expressive and being able to tell a story. And so that built a different kind of confidence in me. It wasn't that I lacked confidence in being out there in front of people, but suddenly I was celebrated for it, and it was seen as a positive thing than something that would cause an eye roll. And that is one of the amazing things about doing theater, is that there is a place for everybody. There's a place for introverts. There's a place for extroverts. There's a place for the analytically minded. There's a place for the people whose minds go in a million directions artistically. And there's a safe place for all of those people there.
Yeah. It's truly a belonging. It's a place where everyone belongs.
So, what strategies can educators use to encourage parents and community members to support theater-related activities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first piece of this is communicating the value of theater, right? It's sharing the reasons why this is important. I think a lot of parents may not realize how theater is going to support academic growth or SEL learning or team building skills. I think when we think of theater as theater makers, of course people are working as a team, right? You have to be a good team player to be a theater maker. But I think it's not a soccer team, right? So I think it's about sharing some messaging and communicating that value, framing theater as an educational tool and not just an extracurricular activity. I think highlighting some research-backed benefits, and actually the Kennedy Center has really incredible resources to share if that's something that people are looking for.
I actually think that I have several of those resources up on my Padlet.
Awesome.
my Department
Yeah.
of Education Padlet. But I would also say to you, if you have resources that you would like me to put out there, just send them my way, and I can add them to the Arts Integration Leadership Padlet.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to share those with you, but you may already know about them. Yeah. And I think also inviting parents in. I think thinking about that message of belonging and creating how to invite parents in, even if you're doing process-based work, is there a way to encourage parent participation or engagement or sharing pictures? I I I think emphasizing that fun factor, because showing kids engaged and having fun is going to really resonate with parents. So when they see their children excited and eager to participate, they're going to want to support it and know more about it. So I think that there's also I think about your school, Joshua, and ways that is there ways to are there ways to make what you're doing with theater accessible language wise and break down language barriers that might be
Absolutely.
there?
What I was thinking as you were talking is I could see myself if I were to use Emily's activity and do three little pigs in different settings, so three little sharks, three little aliens, and then send home through my translation software a text message that says, "Ask your child about three little aliens."
Yeah.
Ask your
Yeah.
child about and start those conversations so that you move beyond the what did you do in school today? Nothing. Did you learn anything today? No. Who did you play with? I don't know. Right? Which Reba is definitely in your future. Um
Well, and then I mean I think like I hear about kids like learning improv games from us and then going home and teaching the same improv games to their parents around the dinner table.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think that there's a take home here that's really powerful to combat the silence of how was your day, right? And a way for parents to engage with kids in a playful way. I mean, I think we're all looking for that. So theater is joyful, it's transformative, and when parents see their children are happy and engaged and learning, I mean, how would you not want to support it, right?
Right,
Um,
absolutely. And that I mean that goes and again, if we integrate and infuse our curriculum with these engaging and meaningful activities, these activities that give students purpose for what they're learning, students will then become excited about the Pythagorean theorem. Students then become excited about developing their own scripts. In December, available on my Padlet, I did a session on ChatGPT and use Reader's Theater and using ChatGPT to develop leveled, diverse Reader's Theater scripts. And that's exciting and engaging to students for them to be able to have an idea and throw their ideas into this computer program and have a 4-page script come out of it also is really exciting. And that is learning in the 21st century. In 2025, we have to learn how to use all of these tools. And so how do those tools relate to the arts in an ethical way that isn't stealing other people's ideas, that isn't because there are all sorts of ethics questions around it. But every time we create relevance, relevance is one of the 3 R's, right? Rigor, relevance, and relationships are what everything in my classroom stems out from. And relevance is as important as the rigor, maybe more so, because you can't get to the rigor without the other two. And relationships also naturally come out of these kinds of activities. Emily, can you talk about how educators can ensure that plays or performances chosen reflect diverse voices and stories? I know this is really a priority of Maddie's Theater. I think that it has gotten easier to find more of our students' realities reflected in theater, but it hasn't always been easy.
No.
Those diverse materials has not always been easy.
It really begins with a diversity of authors. And that's something that we've been really diving into in Maddie's Theater, is making sure that we have a representation of different communities in the author of the play, and making sure that we have different perspectives and different life experiences being told in from the get-go, from the words being written. um, and then from there, the message of the story is important. We often find stories, um, we enjoy stories that are comfortable and familiar, but pushing outside of our comfort zone is where learning can really begin. We've done a few shows in the past few years and that have really resonated with audiences and with myself. One, we did an adaptation of a book called Nieve en la Jungla, Snow in the Jungle, which is a bilingual children's picture book about a polar bear who speaks Spanish and moves to the jungle where they speak English. And it's about Nieve, the polar bear, adapting to her new surroundings. But we really were able in the play to look at it from the jungle students as well, of them accepting Nieve and finding ways to make her feel welcome. And something that really stuck out to me with that show is we had a family come, and one of the girls was maybe 14 or 15 and broke down in tears because they had just moved here. They were not strong English speakers. She said that she saw herself on that stage in a way that she had never expected to. And that, I mean, the show was 3 years ago and it has resonated with me every time we read a script. I wonder if there's a kid in the audience who's going to see themselves on the stage that in a way that they haven't before. Coming up in April, we're doing a play called Morris Micklewhite in the Tangerine Dress, which is about a boy who wants to wear a dress because he thinks it reminds him of his mother's hair and of space, and he feels like a powerful astronaut when he wears it. But the other students in his class tell him boys can't wear dresses, and he really comes to terms with himself of, no, I can wear this. I feel great when I wear this. And I am so excited for kids in the audience to feel empowered to see themselves in that. Especially in the world that we're living in right now, there is no shame in being yourself. And I think that in a trusted environment where students can sit and take in these stories, curious stories in a trusted environment, is where learning can really begin.
I want to, oh, go ahead, Reba.
Well, I just wanted to add to this. We have a close partner that we work with quite a bit that we're so lucky to have here in the state is I'm Your Neighbor Books. And I know that Kristen, who's the ED of I'm Your Neighbor Books, has done a lot of work with the Maine DOE and in schools.
In fact, every school in the state of Maine has an I'm Your Neighbor Books library.
So, Nieve in La Jungla is actually one of the books in the library, and I think that that library is such an awesome resource, and so many of those books could be the start of a reader's theater or some kind of process drama in the classroom. And Kristen is so game to bounce like theatrical ideas off. We're actually working with her on a new play adaptation, not next year, but the year after. So I think thinking about that welcoming library that you already have access to as a starting point for wanting to tell a story that reflects a diverse voice is such it's a resource that's already there, and wow, we're so lucky to have it.
I want to tell about my experience with the show at Maddie's Theater, and it happens to be a Maddie's Theater show, but it could have been a show at any theater that had chosen to present this material. I want to talk a little bit about Beautiful Blackbird. And the reason I want to talk about Beautiful Blackbird, especially since it is Black History Month, I want to talk about Beautiful Blackbird because I think sometimes in our schools, we teach Black history through a lens of overcoming adversity and that hero lens. And Beautiful Blackbird to me was a story, and it was for very young audience members, and yet it touched me and moved me. It was a story about Black joy. And I think that one of the things that theater can do is it can take our diverse voices, and I teach in one of the most culturally diverse elementary schools north of Boston. We are a majority BIPOC school. And so that's a big responsibility as a white educator to be sitting in front of a classroom where the majority of my students are students of color. And to see Black joy embodied on stage, to be enveloped in love and joy and pride is a powerful message that I don't know that all of our students are getting through our traditional curriculum. So I wanted to throw that out there too.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
All right. Our next question is for both of you, and we have this question and one more left. Thank you for spending your time today. What evidence or personal anecdotes can you share about the long-term benefits of exposing students to theater, both academically and personally? And I think we've touched on this quite a bit, but if you have a specific story, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah. So I taught high school theater. I helped run a high school theater program in a sports focused boarding school, college prep. These kids were going D1. It was very athletics focused. And they tapped me to help run their theater program, which was a struggle in and of itself. But what I really learned through that and kind of the philosophy that I brought to it, was that theater is a team, and theater is learning how to be a team without the pressure of winning a game. They assumed that theater couldn't injure anybody. So I would get the right. I would get the varsity basketball team every fall because they wouldn't get hurt and they by playing another sport, so that they'd be ready for basketball in the winter. And I would spend that whole fall season teaching them how to be a team off the court, so that once they were on the court and they were playing games, they were a cohesive unit. And the basketball coach and I really worked together to create this message of teamwork. And it's incredible. Now a bunch of them are in the NBA. It's really fun to see them play and be like, I taught you how to paint something black. But they came together and were so proud of the work that they did off the court. And then together on the court, they had better communication styles. They trusted each other in ways that they hadn't before. And it was really beautiful to see them grow as young men as well as theater makers and athletes. So often teamwork is taught through athletics, but that emphasis is on working together to win and not just to achieve a goal. And in theater, we elevate each other's successes and we help one another through mistakes all the time. If an actor forgets a line on stage, you're not there by yourself. You have someone with you to help you move the story forward. You learn to trust your team, that the people there are not going to let you fail. We are all here to tell the same story. And then students, I helped run a summer camp for a long time, and we would get these 10-year-old boys who could not ever find a place where they felt like they belonged. And it was the first crew program that I really started, was to give these boys a place where they felt like they could be a part of something. They called themselves the Ninja Magicians because they loved to wear black and hide in the curtains. And they really took pride in the fact that they made the theater magic happen. They knew that the applause at the end of the show was not just for the actors, but for them as well. Even though they weren't on stage getting the applause, they knew that they were a part of that team. It really taught them that you don't have to be front and center to be a part of something, that they were content being in the background and not having their faces or their names as widely known as their peers who were on stage singing the power ballads, but they were the ones controlling the spotlight so that the actor could be seen. They were the one moving the chair so that they knew exactly where to sit. And it was really powerful to watch these boys who had floundered for years find their place. And it's one of the most inspiring things I've ever had the opportunity to do, was to help. They're all out of high school now. 3 of them graduated with 4.0 GPAs. I'm so proud of them all. But they're just these incredible young men who understand that their contributions don't need to be huge in order to make an impact to a team.
Thanks for sharing that. Reba, do you have any anecdotes?
I struggled with this question so hard because I can think of hundreds of them. And those examples, Emily, are really, really beautiful and powerful. And I think about so many of the kids that I've worked with that have gone on to become, I mean, I am very proud of one of the actors that I've known since she was 7, and she's starring in the show at Portland Stage right now, and on her way to become a touring theater actress. But I'm also really proud of the people that I've worked with that have gone on to careers that aren't in the arts. That are I one of the people that I worked with as a young actor is the director of the daycare where my child is going. So I think, to me, theater offers this level of I can do it, and confidence and problem solving and collaboration that is incredible when you decide to go into a career in the arts, but it's also incredible if you want to be a daycare director or a lawyer or a doctor or a marine biologist or work at a gas station. I think that intrinsic motivation is so fragile. It's so fragile. And I'm not sure what makes it tick. And I think so much of what we need to give children is happiness in the present, and finding their sparks and opportunities to figure out who they are in this world. And I do think that theater offers that. So I'll stop there.
I would definitely agree with that. It was just a little over a year ago that I was at about more than a year ago now, about 15 months ago, I was at the gala, the Maine Teacher of the Year gala. And that was a big night for me and my family. And the first person that I reached out to and invited to attend that gala was Deborah Jean Scheibel, my high school theater teacher, who was one of the teachers who saw me and loved me for all of my quirkiness and all of my annoyingness. And she flew in from North Carolina to spend the weekend with me, essentially. And those humans that we encounter, I don't have a career in theater. Theater is a side gig for me. It certainly informs everything I do, but I'm not a full-time professional theater maker. But she saw me and she celebrated me. And that's what we do as teachers. We find, even when kids are hard to love, we find a way to love them and make them feel loved. And I'm 54 years old. And I invited my teacher to come celebrate this accomplishment in my life. My theater teacher came and celebrated this accomplishment in my life with me. And that, I think, that's a long-term benefit right there, right? She is a part of my life forever. She's a part of my story forever. How can partnerships with theater professionals or organizations enhance students' experiences and inspire future careers in the arts? We've talked a lot about it being process-centered, but I think our hope also is that we do train and inspire future artists. And that can mean all sorts of things. It can mean the kind of artist I am, which is someone who has his feet planted firmly in the art scene, but that isn't my career. Or it can be people who are having amazing careers on Broadway or as touring performers or working in regional theater or teaching theater. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think seeing multiple shows at the same theater builds a trust between the storyteller and the audience. Students will see familiar faces in different plays. We have one actor who was in Knuffle Bunny, he was in Go Dog Go, he was in Gruff. Kids come in and they know him specifically from Charlotte's Web. And they'll say, "Oh, you were this character, and I remember that, and I know I liked you, so I know I'm gonna like this show too." um, and when they begin to look forward to those experiences, and then they want to get involved themselves if they can see an actor an actor's range from playing a pig to, I mean, we do a lot of animal based shows, I'm realizing as I tell this, because this specific actor went from a goat to a pig to a dog. But that's a range of an actor, and kids can see that and think, oh, I can do that. And then they want to get involved and they want to try it themselves. And is for most kids, once they try it, they love it. And it's all about creating that trust with the storytellers on stage, and you can only do that by repeating to the same place over and over.
Yeah. I think I would also just add that it takes a village, and I think every child deserves a community centered approach to being raised up in this world. And I think that thinking about ways that schools can move beyond, not feel siloed, right? And connect with different organizations around them, so that community organizations or nonprofits can be part of that village that's going to help raise up these children. I think that's something that I'm always looking for. I love hearing from a teacher or a guidance counselor or a principal of like, hey, we have a pocket of kids that might really benefit from a tour or hearing more about what you're doing, or a class. And I love trying to figure out a place for them here at Maddie's Theater. So I think whether it's reaching out to us, which I'm imagining my inbox is gonna get flooded tomorrow and I can't wait. Or just reaching out to whatever theater is your local theater. I think that theaters want to embed themselves in the community. Um, or and they should, I think theaters want to be that very strong part of a community. So let's reach out and let's work together.
Absolutely. I think that having come from a background where I started directing in community theater, and a community theater is a place where you can often have a show where you have a 7-year-old on stage and a 70-year-old on stage, and they are both equal in status. That 70-year-old performer is no more important to the process and to the show than the 7-year-old who's up on that stage. And when children have the opportunity to see their culture reflected on stage, or their peers making art on stage, it changes perspectives, it changes mindsets, and it creates this idea of, I can do that. I can be a part of that. So, Reba and Emily, I want to thank you so much for taking your time this afternoon to chat with me about this. Folks who are watching this video later, I want to remind you that you can go to the Teacher Leader Fellows page, which the address is here on the screen. You can visit my Padlet. This video will live on my Padlet along with all of the others. I'm going to invite you to join me on February 27th for my rescheduled webinar, Creative Connections, showcasing student artwork in the community, where I'll be joined by Emily Surway, National Board Certified art teacher at Deering High School, and we'll be talking about how you can move your students' artwork beyond the walls of your school and get it out into the community. Because just as we've been talking about today, the people in your community want to see this. The people in your community want to be a part of lifting up and be a part of your students' village. Thank you both again so very much. And I really appreciate, I know you have very busy schedules, and I appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
This has been a delight. Thank you so much, Joshua. And I would invite anyone to reach out to us if they have further questions as well. We'd love to just be a resource.
I will make sure that there is contact information for the Children's Museum and Theater of Maine on my Padlet, so that everybody has the opportunity to do that, reach out. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your night.
Right. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.